Alrighty everyone, hello, and welcome back to a quick and dirty video just to get this situated, settled, and out of the way here as we come into the Lenten season. You can see here I've got a little bit of schmutz on my head. I've only had one person ask what was on my head today, so that's great. And that's because today is Ash Wednesday, and Ash Wednesday is the start of the 40-day period in Christian religion known as Lent. So I'm not here to talk specifically about Lent, but more about just the general concept of fasting in general, because Ash Wednesday, along with Good Friday, are also fasting days. And some people might have some icks and squicks about that I would just like to get out of the way here for folks who are unsure or a little spooked by it, but want to know why people would fast on this time to begin with. Before all that though, hello, hi, if you are new here, my name is Sarah Stresen and I'm a Christian witch. I am a content creator, an educator, a writer specifically of this book right here, Discovering Christian Witchcraft, which, if you heard the term Christian witch and you said, what do you mean? Don't worry, this book right here is a one-stop shop, pretty much handles the whole situation. Biblically, all the verses that you're already trying to Google about witchcraft, handles them. Also goes over history, right? European history a little bit, the evolution of the word witchcraft, basic ways to get started, how to integrate concepts of magic and witchcraft into Christian philosophy, and a whole lot more. So definitely check that out if you are interested in this, if you are new to this concept, if you want to stay with Christianity, but also know that you are aligned with witchiness as well. And again, if you are new here, please do hit that subscribe button, like the video, hit the bell, all that good kind of stuff. And for all of my friends who are coming back, thank you so much for sticking around. And also for everyone, remember, if you head over to my Patreon, you can get all of these videos 2 weeks early and ad-free, which is very, very fun. Also helps us get some topical videos a little more topically, right? So, which is always great. But now, as we talk about fasting, let's start just by pointing out the fact that this is not a Christian-specific tradition by any means. When we talk about fasting, which means restricting your food intake in, a pretty, I guess, extreme way, right? This isn't something that only shows up in Christianity. In fact, I would say that most world religions do have some semblance of fasting in it, or some semblance of, just abstaining or self-denial in some way. In fact, right now, as we've just come into Lent, the Muslim community has been doing Ramadan fasting for this entire time, Ramadan being the holy month of Islam. And in that time, right, Muslims will abstain from eating or drinking anything from sun up to sun down. And once the sun goes down, then you can eat and drink and all the other kinds of stuff. In the Catholic tradition, specifically, in terms of Christianity, fasting for us means one meal a day. And if you really, really, really need it, a couple little snacks, but those snacks should not equal as much as a full meal. So we can still drink, we can still have like coffee, energy drinks, water, whatever we want, but only one meal a day. And also on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday, no red meat whatsoever. And that red meat thing is going to follow us the entire time of Lent for every single Friday. Now I say Catholic specifically because in Orthodox Christianity, which is kind of the flip side of that more very traditional old school Christianity, they have a very different way of going about this. And that way is pretty intense. That way includes no animal products whatsoever the entire 40 days, as well as, definitely like not eating before noon on the actual fasting periods, if not just going without food the entire day. And of course, we can't talk about the Christian fasting tradition without talking about where it came from in the first place, which is Judaism, right? So in Judaism, especially if you've read the Jewish Bible, which Christians know as the Old Testament, you'll notice that there are many times where prophets, or even like King David and other folks, will spend a day fasting. And there are many different reasons to fast in a Jewish perspective, including as an act of mourning. We see a lot in the Bible where people are kind of wearing sackcloth, weeping, fasting for a day. There's also to show piety, right? To show that one is really dedicated to God and the world beyond our world. There's also fasting as a means of even changing God's mind, as King David does when he is fasting to kind of stave off God's anger for a lot of the crazy shit that David did. And in modern Jewish practice, one of the most iconic times people know that Jewish folks are fasting is Yom Kippur, which is that Day of Atonement, which is that one day a year where really like all of the sins of the community are like purged, repented, confessed, so on and so forth. It is a kind of 24-hour fasting ordeal. And we can also see the ties here between Islam and Judaism in that also in Jewish tradition, especially like in biblical stories, there was no eating at all, and there was also no drinking, so no water or anything like that. But it's not just Abrahamic religions that do this, right? One of the biggest examples of a religion we can see that employs fasting in any extent is actually Buddhism. Buddhism is really big on things that encourage discipline and self-denial and self-mortification, and that includes fasting. Nuns and monks of Buddhism are not to eat at certain points of the day, right? They're not able to eat in the evening. Kind of, I think before noon is when they're going to eat. And after that, it's mostly just like a fruit juice or like water or something. But the point is to practice that self-denial, to develop that spiritual discipline, which really is a big reason that generally most religions would have something like this, right? Same in Christianity, same as well a little bit in Islam, but with these religions also the focus isn't just on self-discipline and learning to say no to one's cravings, urges, and so on. It's also to kind of align with the plight of the poor, especially in Islam. Ramadan, this is a moment where definitely you're going to see a big key component being to have that sympathy for people who go without. Kind of the point is, right, to put yourself in the shoes of people who don't have anything to eat or to drink, to feel that struggle, even just a tiny little bit the way they feel it, and to remind yourself that people in the community are suffering and that not everyone's having a great time, right? I've seen many Muslim folks say that, like, they get to break their fast at the end of the day, but people who are homeless, people who have no money, they don't get to break that fast, right? They just be fasting all the time out of necessity because they don't have anything to eat. So it's a sympathy builder, it's a community builder, right? Because if you cannot fast for reasons we'll get into, you can still, donate money. If you don't have any money to donate, you can at least do acts of service or volunteering. So there's ways to just remind yourself of the community and give back. And in a Christian perspective with Lent, there's that sense of, yes, almsgiving, yes, there's all these other things you can do and think about, but there's also, because this is a time period that commemorates the leading up to the death of Christ, right before Easter, this is also a time to align specifically with Christ's suffering and Christ's sacrifice, to remind us of what he did that for and why and how all this had to happen, and also to remind ourselves that we are not only our bodies. And in fact, the ashes on the head that go on Ash Wednesday is in part to be something of that mourning ritual, right? There's this idea of, in the Bible, of ashes being dumped on the head as a sign of mourning, but also in the Catholic tradition to remind us that from dust we were made and to dust we shall return, that we will all die, and that we should really be using our time very wisely on this earth. It's also naturally, in the spirit of Lent, an act of penitence to do fasting like this. It is a sign, that we are recognizing the wrongs that we have done, that we are trying to be better over the course of this 40 days. Obviously, no one can do a total 180 on themselves in the span of a day, right? No one can repent and then just be a totally different person within the next 12 hours. But in this 40 days, it's really about self-denial, breaking bad habits, stepping out of these headspaces we've been in, and recentering on the things that actually matter in the world, right? Like serving our communities and reminding ourselves that material comforts and riches aren't all there is to the world. And especially in a time like the one we have today, I feel like this is extremely important to do and extremely important to pay attention to, because way back when, it was no doubt much easier to fast because people didn't have so much. There's something to be said for that angle of, like, yes, of course, back in the day, this was definitely something to not only remind us of the poor, but also many of which who are among the poor ourselves could then say, well, look, this is still a holy thing, this to be able to persevere despite these things, right? But now, in a time where people do have so much excess all the time, where, yes, there is food insecurity in America and across the whole world of varying degrees. The fact is that most people in the West, specifically America, Europe, they don't have the same level of food scarcity that our ancestors did. On record, I understand that there are many people who really do actually have that level of food insecurity, who have to choose between paying for the lights, paying for rent, or paying for groceries. And that is horrible. And this is where this kind of fasting is meant to remind us of the fact that we actually have quite a bit. We have quite a bit of luxury and comfort compared to many people in our own communities, never mind in some distant, remote place. But beyond that, the people and the culture that we see continuously promoted in advertisements and everything else, especially and specifically in America, is one of such excess. It's one of constantly getting something more, bigger, better, grander, right? I mean, sometimes you see those videos of like shops in New York City making the most abominable looking cookie dessert combos, and you wonder, at what point is this too much? In a world like this, where we're constantly being advertised to continuously consume, eat more food, richer food, fattier food, bigger portions, bigger, supersize everything and everything like that, and to always, at any given point, immediately give into whatever it is that we're craving at any given point, things like religion and spirituality, specifically fasting, and in times like Lent or Ramadan, remind us to step back and remind us that we are more than this meat suit we're all walking around in, right? Remind us that it's not necessarily a good thing to give into your every single urge, craving, hunger, pang, or whatever. It's not good for your mental resilience. It's not good for your spiritual discipline. It's really not good at all to be someone who caves to the body's every animal instinct. Because I tell you now, if you took the brain out of your head and let your body just autopilot, it would not do a damn thing it did not have to. We would be looking like those people in WALL-E real fast. Because the body inherently, as an animal creature, wants to gain energy, hold on to energy, and expend as little energy as possible. This is how creatures survive, of course. But we know better than that. And we also know that that's not helpful, that's not conducive, that doesn't get us anywhere, that doesn't help us grow, that doesn't help us stay focused and sharp. All that really does is keep us right where we are, doing nothing, accomplishing nothing, thinking nothing, and being very little more than the average livestock. That's not good. So fasting in a world like this that continuously tells us to consume is definitely a bit counterculture, and it's definitely a way to kind of stick it to all these corporations that try to prey upon our cravings, our urges, our instincts, and especially our greed. But again, I do know that some people may be hearing this and maybe saying, but, maybe I'm sick, maybe I've had an eating disorder, or maybe I've, I can't do that for X, Y, and Z reasons. And I'm here to tell you that's okay. That's totally fine. Because in all of these religions, including Christianity, for Lent, one of the biggest things about this is that the point of this is not to hurt yourself. The point of fasting is not to endanger yourself, to injure yourself, or anything like that. And that's why there are rules that say that if you are very young, if you are elderly, if you are, nursing or pregnant, or in cases like, for example, Ramadan on your time of the month or anything like that, you don't need to fast. No. In fact, please eat to keep your health up, right? We're not doing this to endanger ourselves. We're not doing this to torture ourselves. The point of this is to make it a physical embodiment of this penitence, to also give that food up that we would have eaten basically as sacrifice, in a way, to atone for all the things that have gone on. And also as a sacrifice, as a saying to God himself, like, hey, look, I am committed to this. There is nothing on earth that is more important than following the way, right? But if it comes to things like illness and disability, right, eating disorders and all these other things, by all means, you do not have to think of fasting as purely something about food. As I was just saying about overconsumption, there are many ways people can fast that don't have anything to do with food. If you find yourself in a position where you've been spending a lot of money on things you really don't need, and you've been kind of on this like shopping bend, a materialistic bend, for example, you might fast from extraneous purchases. You might put that wallet deep in the depths of hell for 40 days and just leave it there and only buy things you need, like groceries or anything else. It'll save you some money in the long run, and it'll also teach you to really analyze what is necessary and what is not. Or, right, as I was saying in the case of Ramadan, people who cannot fast, they end up doing some other things like give to charity or do some volunteer work. So you might take a note out of their book and say, well, okay, if I can't fast right now because of whatever reason, maybe instead of going out for dinner at some point once a month, or instead of getting takeout once a month, you take that money and you donate it and you eat something at home instead, right? There are so many ways that we can think of fasting that don't necessarily have to do with just not eating. That's a very on-the-nose, entry-level understanding of abstinence and fasting and self-denial. But again, in a world where so many people actually have much more than they realize that they have, and that they are disconnected from the feeling of hunger and from the feeling of want, it's something to remind us of, right? So that we don't ever forget that things could be a lot worse, and so that we are also prepared in case they do. So, I hope you are all having a great start to our Lenten season. May all of us find something to either add to our day for our spiritual development or something to give up for our spiritual development, be it a vice or anything like that. And may we all have a very fruitful Lenten season. So with that, I bid you all goodbye, and I'll see you next time for some more good chats. See ya!